All right, next up, our keynote speaker, Chris Kuenne. He started Rosetta in 1998 and grew the company from the scratch and sold recently to Publicis for $575 million. He's a graduate at Princeton and Harvard. Before that, he spent like 10 years at J&J with popular brands like Band-Aid and Tylenol. He was a brand manager, being industry leader. If you are with ad agencies, you know him. He spent a lot of time with the agencies. So I'd like to have Chris. We are very honored to have you here. So it's all yours.
What a treat it is to grow up in this town and to have been thrown out of this library many times when I was in second, third, and fourth grade for talking. And now I get to talk in this library with a microphone. It doesn't get any better than that. It's really a pleasure to be addressing you and tell you a little bit about the Rosetta story, and then put that into context with some other research that I'm involved in to try to really figure out what is it that differentiates companies that grow in an explosive growth fashion and those that don't. So my intention is to only speak, even though I get the chance to talk at the library now, for about 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes, and then really throw it open to questions, because for me to be relevant to all of you, I'd really like to know what's on your minds and see how I might be able to be helpful. So in terms of a little roadmap, in the military, they teach this really basic way to present. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So here's the tell them what you're going to tell them part. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Rosetta story in a fairly short and high-level manner. And the headline of that, as Venu very generously introduced me, I was able to build Rosetta from about, as we used to say, exactly $0 million in revenue on the day that we opened, which was June 3rd, 1998, out in Carnegie Center. And the business is about $250 million today. And we were fortunate enough to team up with the Publicis Group before they teamed up with Omnicom. And we sold the business for $575 million. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what it was like to build Rosetta and maybe what some of the key elements were. And then move into what we learned. And it's been very interesting as I'm completing my leadership of Rosetta and moving into the next chapter of my life, which is involved which I've been involved doing research, teaching at Princeton, and starting a private equity firm. And it's interesting, all of you who are entrepreneurs know just how tense and intense our lives are. And it's been interesting for me over the last 6 months to really reflect back on, so what were the building blocks? What were those things that we learned, but we had our heads down for so long and so intensely that I now have the chance to have a little bit of oxygen and a little more sleep and a little more working out, and I get the chance to reflect on these things. And so we're in the process of doing some research on trying to validate that we believe there are 5 key growth cornerstones to making a business like Rosetta work. And I'd like to share those with you today, and then how we're applying that research both going forward and in our private equity practice. So first, a little bit of context. Each of the presenters did a great job of talking about the size of the market and the context. And so I thought I might do that a little bit here, although many of you know the marketing services business, and this problem that's depicted in picture form here is something that creates tremendous opportunity for all of us in the room. So in 1998, before some of these problems along the bottom existed, the consumer was already becoming overwhelmed. So marketing, as we all know, is all about finding the right consumer, positioning the product in the right way, and speaking with her or him in the right manner. And so as early as 1998, experiences were becoming fragmented. Technical innovation was just starting. The smartphone didn't even exist yet. Channels were really diversifying. It was very hard to put your finger on a material audience for your product if your product were Tylenol or Band-Aid or something else. In the very end of the last century, marketers started to standardize marketing, but tried to do so in a manner that recognized global differences. And then something that every marketer talks about and virtually no marketer does, measurement. So these were the dimensions and the factors that were really at play that helped to accelerate growing Rosetta. And so Rosetta came on the scene in 1998, and we believed that there was a way to create a quantifiable manner to understand the consumer. What truly drives consumers to make the brand choices that they do and to make category usage, a lot of the category purchased, a little bit of the category, and if so, how do they share that set of purchases across brands? And so we set out, based on having a lot of marketing and client-side experience, we set out to actually try to address this problem in this way, trying to quantify an understanding of what drives brand choice and category usage. And so what I'd like to do is give you a quick run through on exactly how we did that, what some of the key steps were, and I give you a sense of the revenue growth that went along. So June 1998, out in Carnegie Center, we founded the firm. There were three of us looking at one another. We were fortunate enough that during some vacation days from the firm that I had been working in, a consulting firm in New York City called First Manhattan Consulting Group, I was able to sell the first two clients. So it was with the courage and lucky factor that we had real revenue coming in that we opened our doors. In fact, we had almost $1 million of revenue sold, part of that to Johnson & Johnson, where I had recently worked, and part of that to Bristol-Myers Squibb. So we opened in June 1998, and in the first 3 years, we really worked on refining and optimizing what we ended up branding personality-based segmentation. And the reason we called it personality-based segmentation is it is very similar to the way a Myers-Briggs test works. Many of you guys have probably taken a personality test, and one of the really startling things, we all think we're remarkably unique, but one of the startling things is in 4 or 5 or 6 questions, they can determine, are you introverted or extroverted? Are you a thinker, or are you a doer? Are you judgmental, or whatever it might be? And so we took that concept and applied it to specific categories of consumer purchase. So we built a personality structure on how consumers make decisions on what cell phones they buy, or what credit cards they use. And in fact, at this point now, 15 and a half years into Rosetta's existence, we've done this in every category you can think of. Over 1,200 times, we've built these models to understand consumer choice. This was the founding vision of Rosetta and continues to be its source of differentiation. So we spent the first 3 years building this approach to understanding the consumer. It was a combination of taking survey data and econometric modeling from the economics department at Princeton. And we were able to really understand consumer choice at a much greater level of detail. We started, not surprisingly, in the healthcare business, because that's where my partner and I had spent most of our marketing career, but very quickly figured out that there were other industry verticals where this phenomenon existed, whereby understanding what drove consumer choice was very important to what brand marketers were doing. So this was 1998, 1999, 2000. We stayed very focused on optimizing our approach to personality-based segmentation. And I will tell you, it was hard in 99 and 2000 when our friends, and at the time it almost felt like our friends' kids, were out creating businesses and being multi-millionaires on paper. But we dodged entirely the dot-com bubble of 2001. Because we had our heads down trying to continue to optimize and scale our personality-based segmentation. And so during this period, you can see we had a very solid revenue increase. We closed the first year, 6 months, we did $800,000. We more than tripled that in the next year, up 60% and so on, all the way through 2004. And this was all basically doing the same thing. Building these segments, high resolution understandings of how consumers make brand choice decisions, and selling them to marketers. And what was disruptive, of course the word disruptive didn't exist back then, but what was disruptive about this was that this was a tool, segmentation, which for marketers is pretty much like the hammer or the screwdriver is to a carpenter. And we were going into the largest brand marketing companies in the world, Johnson & Johnson, Bristol-Myers Squibb, Procter & Gamble. And rather than go through the traditional channel, which was to sell segmentation as a piece of market research to the market research department, we walked right past the market research department and went right to the marketer. Because our form of segmentation was really a strategic tool for driving the overall marketing. Needless to say, we did not make a lot of friends with the market research function. In fact, some people felt that we needed to double our insurance policy because they might run over us in the parking lot. But what we were able to do was create real meaningful value in terms of understanding consumer choice and delivering this in the form of segmentations and ultimately delivering this in the form of really a consulting solution. So 2004, we're $11 million. We have a $3 million relationship with Allstate, a $4 million relationship with Chase. And we're realizing that there are these newfangled agencies called digital agencies. And a company called Digitas at Allstate was taking our insights about the consumer and using it directly to target and tailor their digital marketing. And I have to tell you that as you guys all are hardworking entrepreneur, we thought we were doing reasonably well. We built a nice business. It was really hard work because it was very labor intensive. And we found out that our $3.5 million in revenue at Allstate was generating $20 million of fees for Digitas, who was taking our insights, and actually implementing digital marketing. We found that this was happening at Allstate, we found this happening at Chase, we found this was happening also at AT&T Wireless. And so finally we said, you know what, this really bugs the crap out of us. This is outrageous that it's our insights driving so much revenue for an agency. And my partner and I, who had grown up at Procter & Gamble, had no interest or never expected to get into the agency business. But because this was really a service business at the time, we were throwing off a lot of cash. And so we had a business that was truly bankable. And so a very important thing happened in June of, that happened in June of 2005. And that was my partner and I mortgaged everything we owned. We went to a law firm located up in Forrestal Village, and his wife and he and my wife and I literally signed away everything we owned. And we looked at one another and said, "This better work." And we acquired a business in June of 2005, which was the same size as us, about $10 million. It was a business just by pure happenstance run by a friend of mine who lives here in town, who lives about 2 blocks over there, and also had his office in Carnegie Center. It was a company called SimStar. And so we literally bet the ranch. We had achieved $11 million in revenue. His company had achieved about $10.5 million in revenue. And for about $1 for every revenue dollar, we bought SimStar, mortgaging our house and borrowing money from Brown Brothers Harriman. I'll tell you what happened next in a moment. So what were the key takeaways from this? First, focusing on, we talked a little bit about this at dinner, it seems so simple and so fundamental to what each of you guys is working on, but continuing to be focused on delivering a service of very significant value. So what we were doing for the largest marketers in the world, we're really helping them understand what consumers, based on what drivers of choice, were really underpinning their business. We also focused on marquee clients. I get this question a lot, should I go for more clients that are smaller or fewer clients that are larger? And I personally am a big fan of big marquee clients. Marquee clients made us smarter faster. They were referenceable, so when we said we're doing this at Johnson & Johnson and went to Procter & Gamble, it mattered. when we went to E-Trade and said, here's what we can do for you, and as you know, because you've grown up in consumer packaged goods, we're doing it in Procter & J&J, it lended credibility, it helped us sell Allstate, it helped us sell Chase, so big referenceable accounts. And then this third one is really arguably the most important. We always overhired for the position. I remember one of the most important hires I made, which was in about the same time frame, 2005. I hired the star of McKinsey right before he was about ready to be promoted to be a partner. And the first meeting I had with this guy, he was sort of having a hard time taking me seriously. He said, wait a minute, your company's $5 million in revenue. And you know, like, my boss makes that much money in income every year. Why should I come work for you? And so I just kept at it, and I hooked him on the fact that we could fundamentally change the game in marketing if he would come join me. And in fact, that became the case. I'm going to skip past this slide here. So phase 2 was really about scaling the business, and I touched on this a moment ago. So we acquired SimStar for $10 million, literally mortgaging everything we owned. And in fact, 18 months later, after we took Rosetta at $10 million or $11 million and SimStar roughly the same size, we had a $45 million business. In 18 months, we took $22 million and turned it into $45 million. And the reason we were able to do that was we were able to put the two key elements that digital marketers wanted to have integrated. We integrated them as one of the first folks to do this. So taking deep analytic understanding of the consumer on the one hand, and then digital execution on the other. And the amazing thing about SimStar was they were serving all the same clients we were, but they were serving them by building them websites, and we were serving them building insights about the consumer. So by being able to create better and more effective websites, we were able to sell more service to the same clients and then ultimately to additional clients. So by the time we hit about $45 million in revenue, and this is a pretty profitable business at this point, throwing off about 30% EBITDA, we were able to go out and raise some private equity money. And the story about finding a private equity partner is a story in and of itself, but I'll just give you the short version of it. Being overachiever entrepreneurs, most people say, oh, I'm going to go out and do 2 or 3 or 4 pitches to various private equity sponsors, and maybe one of them will make an offer, and then we'll choose among 1 or 2 of them. Well, we did 12 private equity presentations. Brown Brothers, who helped us do this, thought we were crazy. We did 12, 11 of them made offers to invest in Rosetta, and we chose the 13th private equity firm. So some people would say, well, why did you take so much time to find Lindsay Goldberg? They had actually been working on another deal at the time in marketing services, and they just had decided to walk away from it. And when they heard our story, literally over lunch, they decided to acquire 60% of Rosetta for about $75 million in 2007. This really changed the game. Our partners at Lindsay Goldberg had a common vision, were very supportive, and gave us significant capital to begin to expand the platform. Expanding the platform beyond one single digital agency focused in healthcare to a series of acquisitions. We bought a company in 2008 headquartered in Cleveland called Brulant, and Brulant was doing very similar work to us, meaning they were building digital sites but on the e-commerce side. So we were able to take our deep consumer insights, our high resolution methodology to convert insights into better user experience, and then port that capability right into e-commerce. And Brulant had built itself by becoming the largest systems integrator for IBM in the US, other than IBM itself. And so this was somewhat similar to the SimStar story, but this time we didn't have to sign our lives away. We used private equity money from Lindsay Goldberg, and in fact at the time, Brulant was about $60 million in revenue, and Rosetta was about $50 million in revenue. And so we were able to significantly expand our product scope. In 2009, when the world fell apart, Rosetta was still growing. In fact, we grew our business by 7% in 2009, and we did that by staying with our very large clients, using our demonstrated impact on marketing and marketing effectiveness. And at the very end of that year, we acquired another agency that specialized in pharmaceutical marketing for physicians. In 2010, we then acquired Level Studios, which really cut its teeth on building most of the user interface for Apple, building Apple iTunes, building the user interface for the first iPad, and in fact, Apple today continues to be a very large client of ours. So each one of these acquisitions took that kernel, that first source of intellectual capital, which was how consumers make decisions, and we were able to put them into websites. Then we were able to embed that in e-commerce, and then we were able to embed it in professional marketing in the pharmaceutical space, and then ultimately in, as Apple likes to say, pixel-perfect execution of user experiences in the digital world. So by 2011, by 2010, we were about $220 million in revenue. Each time we made one of these acquisitions, we were able to grow the base business by about 15%, and then a catalytic effect by bringing these capabilities onto our platform to continue our growth rate, which was compound annual growth rate of about 40% during this period. And we got to the point where we had to make a big decision as to whether we would go global ourselves or seek a global partner. My first inclination was, let's get ourselves ready to go public. Let's take the public financing to begin to open offices around the world. And we started to realize just how complicated that was, how each one of these cultures, each one of these markets was actually quite different. And in fact, from a revenue per geography was quite a bit smaller than many of the businesses that we had here in the US. So we had a number of small conversations, quiet conversations, which culminated in selling the business to the Publicis Group in 2011. So what are the key takeaways from this second phase? When you're growing, when you're acquiring, when you're expanding your platform, there's tremendous potential to scatter the focus. And yet, one of the keys to our success was staying focused on this one brand promise, which is if we can translate consumer insights into more effective, more personalized digital marketing, we would be able to continue to grow our client impact and client relationships. The second thing was finding a great capital partner. There was a point at which we could continue to grow the business organically, but we had enough cash flow and enough presence on the shelf to actually expand our business more rapidly, but needed outside capital. And then ultimately, as I previewed a moment ago, we realized that it was time to begin serving our clients around the world. We were starting to lose business because we didn't have offices around the world. And so that's one of the key drivers of having chosen Publicis. So we sold the business. It was about $225 million in revenue, a little less than that at the time at which we closed the Publicis deal. And since being part of the Publicis network, we have now accelerated our growth. In fact, for 3 quarters of last year, we were the fastest growing brand in all of Publicis, staying true to our knitting in terms of converting insights into digital solutions. And now with the Publicis acquisition or merger with Omnicom, there are a whole new range of geographies and new range of agency brands that we can pour our secret sauce into. So here's what Maurice Levy said when he acquired Rosetta and the underlying motivation. I think it's kind of interesting because it's really back on our original strategy. He said, "My greatest concern for the advertising industry is that clients will move from giving us work they cannot do themselves to work they do not want to do themselves." So very elegant, and of course it sounds much better with the French accent, but a very elegant way of saying I'm worried that our industry is becoming commoditized. He then went on to say, we must continue to differentiate our offering through intellectual capital-based value, and Rosetta's consulting-centered digital offering is an excellent example of this. So the reason I go through these steps is that really the founding vision of Rosetta, and I have to be honest with you guys, I had no idea this game was going to play out the way it did. But we stayed true to the fact that by being able to understand the consumer better, we could do better marketing. It was really that simple. And then by doing better marketing, we drove higher cash flows, which allowed us to further invest in the business and do more better marketing. So what I thought might be an interesting way to conclude and use as a little bit of a lever to an open Q&A discussion is, what are the principles? Now that I've had 6 months of real sleep and returning to working out, what are the things that we believe, and we're going out to research and refine, what do we think the real drivers of growth of a success story like Rosetta? So these are all kind of things you probably think about all day long. The trick is to not only think about them all day long, but make sure every one of your strategies and tactics tie to them. So focus on a big and measurable economic problem. I'll tell you in a moment what that was for Rosetta, but you can see it's really related to understanding how consumers make decisions and making more effective marketing. The second, a clear and easy to buy value proposition that is what we call a 3P solution, that it is preemptive, that is proprietary and pivotal, and I'll talk in a moment about how Rosetta, we believe Rosetta is an example of that. Brand culture and talent management that are tightly aligned with and directly supportive of the value proposition. It's really hard to find really good people, whether they're developers, whether they're creatives, whether they're designers, whether they're account-facing or salespeople. And it's even harder to find those people who are of a common vision and really lined up against your value proposition. And I can tell you, when you have people who aren't, it is extraordinarily painful as you're scaling your business quickly. We believe that the scalability formula has to be a combination of organic and acquisition. And what's not mentioned here is that we also are big believers that a platform is a very good way to scale a business. And then ultimately, rigorous financial control, that's a little typo there, rigorous financial control and discipline with real clarity on what is the economic unit of value creation. So in Rosetta's case, the economic value unit was proving that $1 worth of our type of digital marketing created $3.50 of incremental profit. And so we could go back to our clients even in the dark days of 2009 and literally say, nickels in the top, roughly quarters down the bottom, and you don't have anything else that's doing that. So these really, we believe, are the core drivers of Rosetta's success, and now that I get the chance to think about this more broadly, we're doing research to see if this is the case beyond. So just in conclusion, I thought it might be interesting to line Rosetta up against each of those principles. So focused on a material and measurable economic problem. You guys have all heard the story that 50% of my marketing doesn't work, I just don't know which 50%. Well, the reality is that 98% of marketing doesn't work. And therefore, and the underpinning part of that is that most marketers really don't have any clue as to what the ROI of their marketing programs are. We built from the ground up very rigorous measures of marketing effectiveness, and beyond that, an understanding of why specific consumers were drawn to your brand, why others were not, and then we're able to make the marketing work better through that understanding. We had a value proposition that integrates the core elements of the ecosystem, meaning that we were actually buying our way through the ecosystem as we started to make acquisitions. We were a consulting firm. And our first acquisition was the ability to build websites. That was one of the key elements of the digital ecosystem. The next one was e-commerce. The next one after that was professional marketing. And the last one was exquisite, pixel-perfect design using our level of insights. So why was ours preemptive. We had developed a new method of segmentation. In fact, there was talk earlier about patents pending. We actually filed 5 patents and received approval on all 5 of them for the way we did segmentation. Now, I will tell you that I have no idea if anybody's ever violated our patents. But it's very hard to differentiate your segmentation offering when pretty much everybody in marketing does segmentation. But nobody had patented approaches to segmentation, in fact, 5 patents. So it helped with at least the image, if not the reality of the fact that we had a very different approach to segmentation. Pivotal, we really changed the way clients expected, what their perception of what was possible, what their expectations were in terms of how personalized marketing could be measured and what business impact it could have. So we believe that Rosetta was on the path to being, if not actually achieving, this 3P solution. The brand and culture and talent tightly aligned. We were able to consistently overhire for positions at a lower level of salary. Very tricky thing to do. But because we had a currency of a private company, we were able to denominate that currency and hand that currency out to people who are generating real value with our clients, and thereby attracted very, very talented people who were excited about pioneering a new approach to digital marketing. And in so doing, we had really a disproportionate number of the most talented members of the ad community. And then a structural roadmap. We really believe that scaling the platform was key, right? So each one of those acquisitions was not kind of just buying revenue, but rather it was expanding our product offering with the very same customers, having a bigger and bigger impact on their marketing. And then lastly, this rigorous process of measuring and tracking. We got quite good at figuring out how to measure our effectiveness with clients. In fact, we created a Cornerstone process, and we measured our performance with clients more rigorously than they did, and then rewarded the people who worked on that account as a team in their bonus structure, so that we were able to convert an understanding of how we were creating value to a way they were generating value in terms of their own compensation. So not surprisingly, since we came up with the 5 principles, Rosetta better be pretty good at being applied to them. But the next step is to really figure out where else these principles can be applied and to further refine them. So what we're up to now, and when I say we, there are about a half a dozen of us right around the corner on the top of the Bank of America building, and we're building a private equity firm and also doing research that hopefully will culminate in a book. And here's the status of our research. We're right in the middle of looking at 8 companies that we think qualify for this intersection of intellectual property, technology, and services. We plan to launch a full study of 25 companies. So if any of you are working for a company that's growing at least 15% a year and is more than $5 million in revenue and is this combination of services, IP, and technology, we would love to learn more about what you're up to. And we hope to begin publishing the results about a year from now. So that's the research side of things. And then we're applying that research to our own portfolio. Our own portfolio is a bit of an exaggeration. We don't have a portfolio yet, but our aspiring portfolio. And so our intention with a company that I've brand named Rosemark, you'll never guess where I got that name, Rosetta Marketing, Rosemark. We are focusing on taking my 3 partners who are also entrepreneurs and also have scaled businesses like Rosetta's, and really focusing on leveraging that experience dedicated to really serving entrepreneurs at these key growth thresholds. So if Rosetta came along, we would want to be serving Rosetta right at that $10 or $11 million level. We're specializing in, not surprisingly, digital sales and marketing, not on the agency side. I'm conflicted from investing in agencies, but anything in the digital sales and marketing driven type industries, expert business processes, and then creating new value from overlooked assets. And then we're doing this in the verticals that we know best. We've really spent most of our time in financial services and in healthcare and in business services. So that is the Rosetta story in short form, and that is what we think we learned in building Rosetta and what we hope to accomplish next. So at this point, if it's okay with you, Venu, we'll just start up open to questions, and everything's inbound, so happy to answer any of your comments or questions. Yeah.
All right, Adi.
Yeah, Chris, just a question in terms of, we hear and read about software eating the marketing aspect of marketing phenomenon. Do you see Rosetta's story aligned with that concept or against that concept, I mean, bucking the trends?
Yeah, so I'm always a little skeptical of something's eating something else, because ultimately both sides of the eating and the eator end up surviving for sure. But that being said, ad tech is definitely changing the game, and there are a number of drivers at play here. Thank you. Number of drivers at play. The agency business is getting really tough. Really tough. We talked a little bit about this at dinner. Clients are pushing down on billable rates. The most talented digital professionals are pushing up in terms of their compensation, and therefore the margin's getting thinner and thinner. So taking the people out and putting the electrons in to marketing is definitely a phenomenon that's catching a wave. That being said, marketing is fundamentally a humanistic pursuit. And so will these tools, will these solutions end up taking some of the people out? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's the people who come up with the brilliantly creative ideas. It's the people who work with the people on the client side to actually make it happen. And so I don't think we're going to see, kind of ad bot out there. But I do think that some of the parts of the marketing mix will indeed move toward a more automated solution. And then I think that'll be all the more exciting for the humanistic side, because it'll free up the humanistic creative people to be able to do more of that work.
Chris, how important is it for any agency which is providing services to build and own its own technology platform for scale-up?
Yeah, so I think the best strategy is a combination of those two things. There are just tremendous platforms that don't need to be reinvented. So if it's new to the world and you can do it, as I know you are in the process of doing, as we talked about over dinner, I think it's a terrific strategy, but it's not the only strategy. And a mix of off-the-shelf or licensed solutions plus that which you're building in-house, I think is the best combination. And it really comes down to what is your differentiation strategy. But I think most of the next generation winners in agency land will be a combination of those two things. And I'll also tell you that I think there are a lot of very expensive development projects that large agencies are pursuing that are not a good idea, but because they want their own version of something that, frankly, they can buy off the shelf. So I think it's really a very strategic question you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can take you back to the acquisition of SimStar there for a moment, aside from the stress of mortgaging your life to acquire it, did you go through the thinking process of whether it would be a merger rather than an acquisition? Because you mentioned it was someone who was like a friend in the same office building. What went into the decision making of making it an actual acquisition as opposed to a merger?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we all know that luck plays the biggest single role in success, and so there was a very lucky thing for us with respect to SimStar and how it's been so long. I can probably disclose this. SimStar had brought on private equity money 3 or 4 years earlier, and the private equity firm wanted out. And there was a mechanical aspect of the deal that meant that they had to sell the business. And so it really was an acquisition because we were coming up with the money and their control owners wanted out. If it hadn't played out that way, it could have very easily been a merger. It allowed us to be the acquirer when we then moved on with Lindsay Goldberg as our supporters to buy a company significantly bigger than we were, because it was Lindsay Goldberg's money.
If I can just ask a follow-up.
Sure.
If it ended up being a merger, do you think you'd be where you are now?
Wow, that's such a good question. Of all the sleepless nights I've had, I'd never thought about that one. And now I have a new reason to be sleepless, looking backward. Maybe. So I think these deals are enormously complicated. And you know, it looks like everything went perfectly on those. It really didn't. It really didn't. It was one of the things that helped us work through the things that weren't going well was that somebody was in charge and somebody could call the ball. And if that had been kind of a wrestling match, I think we might have wrestled ourselves into a point of sort of neutrality. And that's not to say that we would have done a better job. Maybe if they'd been in charge, but somebody really has to be in charge. And we found this with the Brulant deal also. In fact, it took about a year before we didn't want to seem like we were the marauding Huns acquiring something, particularly something that was bigger than we were. So we were a little too gentle in the early integration. And then you just kind of have to get down to business to make some tough calls. It's a really interesting question.
Ron?
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you think, what is your opinion of how advertising and marketing is changing nowadays? How you have like millions of dollars spent on Super Bowl ads and Geico ads that are like 50, like one thing repeated over and over again, or like Jean-Claude Van Damme spitting. How do you think like the consumer, is that a function of the consumer changing, or is it just, is it an inflation of the marketing sector, or what's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question and a complicated one, so I'm going to try to give you a simple-ish answer, which is incomplete. So I think marketing is dividing into kind of two key elements that in the past, so when I first started my marketing career in 1985, these two things were actually the same thing, and now they're really separated. So you have brand equity advertising, which is really intended to reinforce what the brand promises, to make you feel good about Coke or Geico or whatever it might be. And that's really only got two key outcomes. It's raising your awareness and raising your consideration. What the wonderful world of digital allows you to do is then take that image, that feeling about the brand equity, the awareness, and actually create a brand experience. So you go online and you play a game, you watch a video, you recommend it to a friend, you're... She's back. I thought I recognized her voice, but I can outshout her now. So what digital does is digital allows you to activate the brand, to become more relevant, to connect the consumer to the brand. We were one of the first agencies to create a mobile app for Nationwide, so that when you were right there at the accident, you could contact Nationwide, you could interact with your Nationwide adjuster, you could have the person call the tow truck, whatever it was. That wouldn't be possible back in the 1980s, where you could talk about, you know, Nationwide is on your side, but you couldn't actually put Nationwide on your side until the whole digital phenomenon. So I think oversimplified, the marketing budgets are going to split between awareness building and really engagement, and then more and more money will go into engagement.
Okay, one more question. Nick?
Anyway, kind of on a similar topic, you said you preferred, I'm not sure if I understood, you preferred bigger clients, obviously, right? So how do you feel about, with technology, the ability for far smaller people and smaller companies to market in far bigger ways, like I guess kind of the bootstrapping phenomenon, where a guy can pick up Adobe After Effects, can get together with some business friends, and they can make something that'll go viral in a day.
Yep.
How do you feel about that? Do you feel that it's not really relevant, or not competition? Or, yeah.
No, I think allow me to slightly I did say bigger clients. Let me actually refine that. I think really, really deliberately choosing your clients is the most important thing. So for us, in the business we were in, being validated by having big clients was the way to go. In a viral app world, who you choose as your early adopters. Have you read Crossing the Chasm? Oh, you must read Crossing the Chasm. Or come take my class at Princeton. Always try to sell something. One of the challenges in this sort of more eyeballs, more customers, more page views is better, is that that's not true. And in fact, you want to be really deliberate on getting the right customers in early. And that allows you to create a cascading effect to the next set of customers, the next set of customers. So just because you can actually have 150,000 or 10 million people following you or doing whatever you want from your bedroom, doesn't mean, I didn't mean that way, by the way, doesn't mean that, that they're the right folks, right? And that you're actually creating enterprise value by having that many. So the composition of your customer base is really the key point. And then each business application is different in terms of what's the best, what the right composition is. So thanks for that question. Great question.
Okay. Hi, Chris. So when you were sitting at your financer's office with your wives and your mortgage papers, how
I only had one wife.
I forgot to say your partner and your wives.
This is getting very naughty. What time is it?
Excuse me. How much of that was based on just gut intuition and belief in yourself versus hard numbers that you obviously, I hope, looked at that time?
Yeah. It was definitely both those things. It definitely was both those things. So the whole experience of Digitas getting $20 million for our $2 or $3 or $4 million was very validating that these insights and this strategy was really working, and we just weren't participating in the bigger part of the revenue pool. And then part of it was, we had a pretty good run, right? We'd gone from $800,000 to $11 million in about 6 or 7 years. So we had a pretty high level of confidence that we could make it work because we'd been the client, we'd then been the consultant, we hired agencies, so we kind of understood the ecosystem and we really felt we could make it go. I will tell you though that we put our bid in to acquire SimStar on my birthday, January 12th of 2005, and we got turned down. We got outbid by a company called Kuenne, which some of you may know is on the West Coast. And because they were such close friends, Rob Reback was, we stayed on them, and when the exclusivity wore out or expired, we literally had the offer and the money lined up, and we delivered what was effectively a closing-like document on the last day of the exclusivity period, the first day of it. So it didn't, and this is where the serendipity point comes in. It could have so easily gone the other way, like the earlier question, what if it had been a merger? What if Kuenne had gotten them? I'm really humbled by what it takes to be lucky and to be successful and to be surrounded by great people, because those are the key ingredients. We could talk about principles, all of which hopefully are true or somewhat true, but the real truths are, surround yourself with great people, be ethical, care about people deeply, and ultimately get lucky.